You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Thursday, September 25th, 2014, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. We are back after having a couple of days off, and I tell you, lots and lots has been happening. First of all, we had a major problem with the 420 radio site that required me to rebuild it with a new WordPress theme. So still working the kinks out. If you're having trouble with the site, just email me, russ@radicalruss.com. Let me know. We'll get that fixed as fast as we can. But the new site should be more responsive, and it should work better with tablets and smartphones. So like I said, we'll work the kinks out this weekend. I hope you're able to watch the show just fine. Otherwise, you can't hear what I'm saying right now. Anyway, it's been a pretty hectic couple of days here. Yesterday, I received word that the Clatsop County District Attorney, Josh Marquis, who is the subject of one of the subjects of my open records request regarding these Oregon Marijuana Election Shenanigans, filed an official complaint with me with the Secretary, a complaint about me, I should say, with the Secretary of State's office here in Oregon, complaining that I should be a political action committee because obviously I'm only seeking these records to promote Measure 91. I will tell you all about that. I just received a copy of the email from Marquis to the Secretary of State's office, so I'll detail you what his complaints are about me, and you'll get my response to those complaints. I've already spoken to Go Local PDX, who will be reporting on this story later today, and the Portland Mercury has already printed up their story on this issue. Apparently, I'm not the only one investigating Marquis. Another person has filed a complaint. 4 state representatives have filed a complaint, and those join the complaints of Representative Earl Blumenauer, my congressman, regarding the so-called Oregon Marijuana Education Tour. So my exclusive report on that and my response to this retaliation coming up in an extended Radical Rant today. Also on the show today, we're going to go behind the headlines, and in Behind the Headlines today, we're going to take a deeper look at the records request complaint. We'll read you that story from the Portland Mercury. And then in Drug War Data Mining, we're going to talk about the tragic case of NASCAR driver Kevin Ward, who was killed by driver Tony Stewart. The toxicology report has just come out, and the DA's office not only is not going to prosecute Tony Stewart for anything, the grand jury did not indict, but also says that Ward was high on marijuana at the time, and that affected his judgment. In Drug War Data Mining, we'll just ask, how much marijuana do you need to have in your system to not be able to be murdered in this country? And give you a look at the KIRO driving test video that we showed you last year to try to find out just how much marijuana you got to have in your system before your judgment is too affected. All of that coming up on the Russ Belville Show today. Like I said, an extended exclusive show. I've literally just finished typing stuff up a minute before the show, so not much for the graphics and all the fancy stuff. We'll also have our 420 radio headline news, and the big headline today is Attorney General Eric Holder is stepping down as soon as a successor can be picked. He sat down with Katie Couric and talked about the possibility that marijuana should be decriminalized and rescheduled. We'll bring that to you in the 420 Radio News. Also, in Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio will take your calls at 971-533-7111 and discuss more of the issues of the day. We're back with the news right after this.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, the world's voice of marijuana legalization. It was a nightmare scenario last May for one Southern Oregon woman. It's 4 a.m, and someone's trying to break in.
911 emergency. My ex-boyfriend is trying to break into my house. He put me in the hospital a few weeks ago, and I've been trying to keep him away.
But because of budget cuts, the sheriff's office is only open during weekday business hours.
I don't have anybody to send out there. So if he comes inside the residence and assaults you, can you ask him to go away? Or
he did break into the home, and he did rape and choke this woman. Meanwhile, it was announced that the Oregon Sheriff's Association made a $100,000 donation to the campaign against Measure 91, the initiative to legalize marijuana. So, there's enough money to protect people from marijuana, but not rapists? Measure 91 devotes 35% of tax revenues from marijuana sales to state and local police. Vote yes on Measure 91. A message from the Russ Belville Show, not endorsed or sponsored by the Measure 91 campaign. Drug Truth Network Century of Lies, replaying Mondays at 11 Pacific on...
Mike Schwab is a former middle school science and math teacher. Currently, he works with children daily as an after-school program leader.
Currently, kids have easy access to marijuana with little understanding of its impact. We can take better care of our kids through Measure 91 with strict regulations and funding for proven marijuana education and prevention programs to keep kids from using it. Under our current marijuana laws, one mistake can ruin a life. Measure 91 removes unfairly harsh punishment for marijuana offenses and gets more tax money to local police and drug prevention. Vote yes on 91.
It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
This is your 420 Radio News for Thursday, September 25th, 2014. Attorney General Eric Holder is open to the idea of rescheduling marijuana from the Cannabist. On the brink of giving up his post, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder appears to be more open than ever to talk about the potential rescheduling of marijuana. Marijuana is currently a Schedule I substance in the U.S., along with heroin, LSD, ecstasy, and other substances with, quote, no medical use, end quote, a designation activists have long thought, and a serious roadblock for the legal marijuana industry in states that allow the sale of medical or recreational cannabis. And now Holder, who is in the news this morning regarding his recent resignation as Attorney General, is saying that Americans should question themselves using science as a guide on rescheduling marijuana and its shared classification with heroin. Holder told Yahoo Global News anchor Katie Couric, quote, it's certainly a question we need to ask ourselves whether or not marijuana is as serious a drug as heroin, especially given what we've seen recently with regard to heroin, the progression of people from using opioids to heroin use, the spread and the destruction that heroin has perpetrated all around our country, and to see how, by contrast, what the impact is of marijuana use. Now, it can be destructive if used in certain ways, but the question of whether or not they should be in the same category is something we need to ask ourselves and use science as the basis for making that determination, end quote. Despite governor's objection, Pennsylvania Senate okays medical marijuana bill from CBS Local, Philadelphia. The Pennsylvania State Senate today voted overwhelmingly in favor of a bill that would legalize medical marijuana in Pennsylvania, but the odds are steep against the measure becoming law in the current legislative session. The Republican-controlled Senate voted 43-7 in favor of medical marijuana. The measure was championed by State Senator Dalen Leach, a suburban Philadelphia Democrat. But one big problem for supporters is Governor Tom Corbett. His spokesman, Jay Pagney, says the governor's position has not changed. Quote, the governor is opposed to the legalization of marijuana for either purpose, recreational or medicinal, end quote, Pagney said today. Corbett has proposed a limited research pilot program, but even before the bill can get to him, it has to go through the state house, where, with only a handful of days left in the current session, a spokesman for the majority leader says the medical marijuana bill will have to be reviewed and vetted during at least one hearing. A handful of drug delivery methods that do not involve smoking would be permitted under the bill, including extracted oil, edible products, ointments, and tinctures. Medical marijuana support falls in Southwest Florida and statewide, from thenewspress.com.
In somewhat of an eye-opener, support for medical marijuana has fallen below the critical 60% threshold, with Southwest Florida even less supportive, according to a new poll. The Survey USA WFLA tracking poll finds that 53% of likely voters support Amendment 2, 32% oppose, and another 15% are undecided. To pass, the initiative needs to top the 60% mark. In Southwest Florida, those numbers drop to 48% in favor, 38% against, and the remainder unsure. It's a far cry from the halcyon days of summer when a Quinnipiac poll found nearly 90% support for the measure. The Survey USA poll marks the worst showing to date for the initiative, and only more data will tell us whether this is an outlier or a trend. Other polls in September show the measure hovering just above or below the critical 60% mark. Despite this bad bit of polling news for backers, the News Press Forecast model puts the probability of Amendment 2 passing at 63.9%. Our model, based on all available data, predicts a 61.2% to a 38.8% outcome. Kevin Ward Jr. under the influence of marijuana when killed by Tony Stewart's car, the DA says, from sportingnews.com. Kevin Ward Jr. had enough marijuana in his system to influence his action the night he was killed in a sprint car accident with Tony Stewart, according to the district attorney who handled the case. The 20-year-old Ward was killed when he was struck by Stewart's car during an Empire Super Sprints race, August 9th, at the Canadaguaya Motorsports Park. Ward had gotten out of his car after a wreck, walked onto the track, and was approaching Stewart's car when he was struck and killed. Quote, "There is toxicology evidence in the case relating to Kevin Ward that indicated at the time of operation he was under the influence of marijuana," end quote, said the DA. This has been your 420 Radio News for Thursday, September 25th, 2014. I'm Russ Belville. You can get 420 Radio on the go with our Shoutcast stream for all internet-enabled media players. Go to rad-r.us/420shout or just click the Shoutcast icon below the live radio feed at 420radio.org. The Marijuana Business Association, or MJBA, are proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show. It is the mission of the MJBA to establish integrity and legitimacy, create common market standards, provide market intelligence, and develop best ethical business practices for participants in the emerging legal marijuana industry, including commercial hemp, medical marijuana, and recreational marijuana for adults. Learn more about the Marijuana Business Association and visit mjba.net to join today. That's mjba.net.
NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks may be far less.
I don't use marijuana, but as a teacher of 36 years, I can tell you lots of other people use it. I don't believe in prohibition. I don't think it works. Prohibiting it hasn't stopped anybody from getting a hold of it. I would like to see it regulated so that maybe kids can't get a hold of it so easily. I know they get a hold of it now very easily. I support a new approach to marijuana. I support legalizing it. It's with us. It's not going to go away. And if we can get money through the taxation, we can also educate our kids about it. That's why I support it.
Welcome back, everybody. 14 after the hour, and time for us to go behind the headlines. And our headline today comes from our local paper, the Portland Mercury. And in the Mercury today, we have the headline, "Reefer Madness. The fight over legal weed has inspired fresh complaints from all over the map, including the State House." This was posted by Dirk Vanderhart, and I actually spoke to this reporter yesterday. Clatsop County District Attorney Josh Marquis says Oregon's debate over legal weed is fast becoming a, quote, "real contact sport," end quote. One that's grown more personal than he expected. You don't have to look far to see what he means. The contentious race over Measure 91 is erupting in complaints and attacks with less than 2 months to go before the November 4th election. Let's start with the most recent. Marquis, the state's most strident critic of legal weed, filed a complaint with state elections officials earlier today against radical Russ Belville, a longtime Portland marijuana activist and host of the online radio program The Russ Belville Show. Marquis says an investigation into him by Belville, financed by thousands of dollars in donations, is a thinly veiled effort to fight for Measure 91. As such, Marquis says Belville needs to report his donations and expenditures with the state. Now, first of all, let me just interrupt that because it's very ironic that he thinks me looking for open records requests on an event they're trying to produce that they claim is educational and has nothing to do with Measure 91. Well, that's the pot calling the kettle black, ain't it? Anyway. Meanwhile, Marquis is named in a pair of complaints filed earlier this month, including a letter from 4 state legislators in calling on Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum and the Oregon Secretary of State's office to investigate whether public resources are being inappropriately used to fight the pot measure. Those complaints have to do with a marijuana educational tour of the state scheduled for next month. As initially planned, the tour involved events in 13 Oregon cities and featured a prominent national anti-pot speaker, with much of the focus being on marijuana and its potential downsides. But the whole thing was thrown into chaos over concerns, including those of a pro-pot U.S. congressman, that it was little more than an effort to oppose Measure 91 using federal dollars. The federal funds were pulled, and it's unclear just how many of the original events are still in the works. But State Senators Chip Shields, Floyd Przansky, and State Representatives Paul Holvey and Alyssa Kenny Geyer said in a lengthy letter on September 11th they are concerned public employees and resources are still being used to plan the tour. They're asking the Oregon Department of Justice to look into the matter, along with election officials. The lawmakers wrote, quote, "By all appearances, the tour and its sponsors are violating Oregon law. The DOJ says it hasn't decided whether to investigate and is waiting to see what the Secretary of State's office turns up." A local pot activist has also filed a complaint against the educational tour. Side note, I believe that's my friend Jennifer Alexander who's filed that complaint. In the complaint he filed this morning, Marquis says Belville is effectively campaigning for Measure 91 and so should be required to register with the state. Quote, "He is obviously free to criticize and even lie about my record in his own blog, on his own internet radio show, or by giving away articles to places like the Huntington Post," Marquis wrote in an email sent to the Oregon Secretary of State's office. Continuing, quote, "But when he raises and expends thousands of dollars to affect the outcome of an imminent ballot measure, he is required to register with the Secretary of State and report the name, amount, and occupation of his contributors," end quote. Marquis is citing an Oregon law dictating that anyone who spends more than $750 in a calendar year to support or oppose a cause must file a statement with the Secretary of State. As support for his contentions, the DA offers a link to the crowdfunding site set up by Belville to, quote, "help us fight the use of public funds to defeat marijuana legalization in Oregon," end quote. That fundraising campaign had raised $2,435 as of this afternoon. By the way, it raised another $300 once word of word of Marquis' complaint against me came in. So thanks. Continuing, quote, "I'm just a citizen who's concerned that the district attorney and others in the state and county government have been using grant money to illegally campaign against Measure 91, Belville tells the Mercury. My actions have merely been to gather records," end quote. In a lengthy blog post on his site, Belville details record requests he's filed for communications by 5 Oregon district attorneys regarding the educational series. Paying for those records requests, he argues, doesn't come close to campaigning. In his complaint, Marquis also charges Belville with being the author and creator of the website joshmarquisexposed.com, which appears as a sponsored link when you Google search the DA's name. The site is full of lies, Marquis complains, though he acknowledges he's fair game as a public official. By the way, for the record, I didn't create joshmarquisexposed.com. I didn't buy the domain. I didn't set up the WordPress blog. I have nothing to do with running that thing. I did not fund it. I have not given any money to fund it. The only connection I have with that blog is that I have given them permission to reprint everything that I write about Josh Marquis. See, it turns out more than just I think that there's a problem here. Continuing, quote, "This is probably the most uncivil campaign that I've been around in my entire life," he notes. It's also the first time Marquis has had to go up against an established political machine in the fight over recreational pot. Belville denies being behind the hit site and says he has no idea who put it up, though he assumes they'll contact him at some point in the future. For the record, after the Mercury contacted me, I did find out that the Josh Marquis Exposed is being run by some folks that I do know, and so we will be working together in the future.
In their complaint, the 4 state lawmakers make a case that the educational tour, taking place directly before an election over pot and featuring solely anti-marijuana speakers, amounts to campaigning. And even though many groups have backed away from the effort in recent weeks, the legislators contend public employees still feature heavily. Quote, based on our review of the available materials, in 9 of the 12 counties where the tour is scheduled to appear, county workers are listed as sponsors, the letter reads. Those public employees are participating in the tour. Sorry, one last. Those public employees are participating in organizing the tour stops while on the job. State law prohibits public employees from opposing or promoting political efforts while on the clock. Sorry about the ending there. Like I said, it's been a pretty hectic day here. We're back with drug war data mining on Kevin Ward and that NASCAR crash right after this.
You can get 420 Radio on the go with the TuneIn Radio app for all mobile platforms. Go to rad-r.us/420tunein or just click the TuneIn Radio icon below the live radio feed on 420radio.org. Are you a hypocrite? If you live a closeted cannabis lifestyle, you are. Read about 7 people living a closeted cannabis lifestyle who are on the verge of coming out in The Hypocrites by Mara K. Eaton. Available at areyouahypocrite.net. You can purchase the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, also available on iTunes. Check out Mara K. Eaton on Facebook as well. Learn more at areyouahypocrite.net. The Hollywood Hemptress Hour, replaying Tuesdays at 12 Pacific on 420radio.org. At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
All right, welcome back, everybody. 22 after the hour. And for Drug War Data Mining today, I want to talk about this Kevin Ward Jr. murder. And folks, that's what I consider it to be. If you don't know about the case, it was a race, a NASCAR motorsports race, a sprint cup race, I believe. And Kevin Ward Jr., one of the drivers, had been bumped or jostled by Tony Stewart. And Ward took exception to that. After his car had been wrecked into the wall, he got out of his car and was walking down the embankment of the track screaming at Stewart, apparently angry at him. And according to the family, this is a statement from the Ward family, quote, "Our son got out of his car during caution while the race was suspended. All the other vehicles were reducing speed and not accelerating, except for Stewart, who intentionally tried to intimidate Kevin by accelerating and sliding his car towards him, causing this tragedy." But of course, in the wake of this tragedy, the grand jury declined to charge Stewart with any crimes. According to that story, the 23-member grand jury was cleared Tony Stewart of any charges. They had been recommended to check out, or they'd been recommended charges of, I'm trying to find this, excuse me, charges of negligence, negligent homicide. And the grand jury could not get the 12 votes necessary to indict him. But the news now coming out is the toxicology report and the district attorney trying to distract focus away from Tony Stewart's actions that killed this man into the content of Kevin Ward's bodily fluids. Specifically, the district attorney Michael Tantillo said during a news conference on Wednesday, quote, "There is toxicology evidence in the case relating to Kevin Ward that actually indicated that at the time of operation he was under the influence of marijuana," end quote. However, He was not specific about how much marijuana Ward had in his system and said no toxicology report was presented to the grand jury. Quote, "The levels that were determined were enough to impair judgment," end quote. Well, District Attorney Tantillo, if you've got levels high enough to guarantee this guy's judgment was impaired, why won't you release those numbers? What is the number we need to reach of someone's THC in their blood before we recognize that their judgment is so impaired that they can be killed with impunity? What is that number? Is it 10 nanograms, 20 nanograms, 50 nanograms? And furthermore, I'm making an assumption that we're talking about a toxicology report that detected active THC in the blood. We don't even know that. This could very well be the detection of THC metabolites, carboxy-THC, in the driver's urine that would prove nothing more than the fact that he'd used marijuana within the past few days. Even the detection of the active THC in blood could only indicate that the man had used marijuana relatively recently, within the past few hours, not necessarily that he was under the influence while he was driving. Furthermore, even if someone may have been under the influence of marijuana, the idea that marijuana impairs someone's judgment as to make them aggressive is laughed at by anybody who knows anything about marijuana. Marijuana, if anything, mellows you out, makes you less aggressive. But I thought it might be interesting to just figure out how much marijuana it would take to impair someone's judgment so badly that they could be just killed with impunity. And so we're going to go back into the archives and take a look at just how much marijuana you can smoke and how high the nanograms of active THC can be in your system, and you still have the ability to operate a motor car safely. This is a report that was from last year from one of the Washington news stations, KIRO, and it stars one of my favorite people on the planet, All Day Addy.
To find out how much marijuana is too much to get behind the wheel, we have set up a driving course. We've also recruited the help of a drug recognition expert. And we have marijuana and volunteers. We're going to find out how much marijuana is too much to be on the road.
The strain is actually called Blueberry Trainwreck.
As a consultant prepared our marijuana smoking lab, 3 volunteers each took a practice run on a course set up by the Thurston County Sheriff's Office, designed to test their basic driving skills. In the car with them is Cascade Driving School instructor Mike Jackson, who has a brake on his side of the vehicle for safety.
I can either grab the wheel or I can touch the brake and bring him to a safe stop.
Our first volunteer, Addie, is a 27-year-old medical marijuana patient and heavy daily user who had smoked some pot prior to arriving. A blood test before our experiment began showed she came to the track already 3 times the new legal limit for driving under the influence of marijuana. The limit is 5 nanograms. She was at nearly 16 nanograms. While learning the course, Addie turned too sharp at a stop sign and clipped one of our cameras. But the instructor told us her driving was actually fine. Our second volunteer is 34-year-old Dylan, who uses pot on weekends. An initial test showed no marijuana in his system. Finally, we have 56-year-old Jeff, who uses only occasionally. He also started out with no detectable pot in his body.
All right.
Next, we had the volunteers start smoking marijuana. We gave them each 0.3 of a gram of pot to smoke, and from the light to the heavy user, asked them how they felt.
Feeling really buzzed. Yeah.
Relaxed and buzzed.
I still feel normal.
Back behind the wheel for another lap, Addie drove a bit slower than she should, and at one point struck a traffic cone.
Oh, I hit a cone. I see it in the rearview mirror. Ah!
A blood test would later show Addie was driving at 7 times the legal limit for pot with 36.7 nanograms of marijuana in her system, but still driving okay.
I wouldn't pull her off the road, no. Not yet. Not this point.
After 0.3 a gram of pot, Dylan was doing fine behind the wheel.
Ooh, that was fun.
Even though our lab tests would later reveal he was driving at 5 times the legal limit with 26 nanograms of pot in his system. When we got Jeff on the track, he was being cautious and driving slower than he should, which could catch the eye of a police officer on the road. His blood test showed Jeff was 4 times the legal limit, with nearly 22 nanograms in his system. But again, his driving, while slow, was still at acceptable levels.
He did real well.
We had our volunteers smoke and drive 2 more times until they had all smoked 9/10 of a gram of pot, and they were feeling it.
I'm starting to get it. Oh, yeah. I can feel it in my eyes. I can feel it in my body, in my head.
I don't know if I can get, much more stoned, even if I keep smoking it.
And it started to show more on the road. With a drug recognition expert from the Thurston County Sheriff's Office watching, Dylan started having trouble remembering how to drive the course.
Oh, what is this cone in the middle?
Confused, he turned early and left the track.
You missed out. Let's make our left. Let's do it again. I'll give you a second chance.
Okay.
Then, while going through a 20-mile-an-hour corner, the instructor had to grab the wheel to stop Dylan from swinging wide and hitting our photographer.
Watch yourself, watch yourself.
I had to grab the wheel to keep him basically from running you over.
If I were to be watching him on a road, I would have stopped him.
Jeff's driving also got worse the more he smoked.
His backing is very slow.
We watched him back over a cone, and after 9/10 of a gram of pot, he drove so slowly the officer told us he should not be on the road. Jeff agreed.
You don't think you should be behind the wheel right now?
Well, I would prefer not to, yeah.
After 9/10 of a gram, Addie was becoming much more aggressive, excited about being high and behind the wheel.
One time in your life you get to do this, you should do it. Yeah. You should do it! Yeah. That's awesome.
But she made no major mistakes, and we asked the officer if he would pull her over.
Borderline.
We decided to allow Addie to smoke one last time, bringing her total smoked to 1.4 grams. Back in the car, Addie knew she was having trouble.
Way more stoned. Definitely shouldn't be driving.
And she drove with no restraint.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Look at that. That was awesome. That was awesome.
Less than 30 seconds into the drive, she started backing up and didn't stop until she wiped out a cone.
Which would have been indicative of backing into a pole or maybe a citizen on a sidewalk.
The sheriff's officer, driving instructor, and even Addie agreed she would not be safe if she was on a public road.
She would be a danger, yeah.
Yeah, definitely that's dangerous.
To confirm the volunteers were driving impaired, we treated them like anyone else pulled over and suspected of drug use. The county's drug recognition expert put them through a 12-step evaluation, checking things like their balance. Heart rate and blood pressure were also checked. They all had issues, including Jeff, who couldn't find his nose with his fingertip.
I would say that all 3 would have been arrested for driving under the influence.
A final blood check 1 hour after her final smoke showed Addie at 11 times the legal limit with 58.8 nanograms in her system. We checked Jeff an hour and 45 minutes after his last puff of pot, and his levels had dropped to 2 times the legal limit at 12.9 nanograms. And Dylan was tested a full 2.5 hours after he last smoked and was still 2 times the legal limit, but his nanograms had dropped to 11.1. It's true all 3 volunteers were able to safely drive a car for a while, 4 times or more over the legal marijuana DUI limit, but they eventually made driving errors that on a public road could have resulted in getting pulled over by police or much worse.
Other people's lives are in danger when someone gets stoned and goes and drives.
Just like you're drinking. If you go out drinking, you don't need to be driving. If you're out smoking, you don't need to be driving.
Some critics argue the legal limit for driving under the influence of marijuana was set too low. So, does the fact that our volunteers were able to smoke pot and drive safely at 4 times the legal limit prove their case? Not necessarily. That's because the intoxicating effects of marijuana vary from plant to plant and from person to person. And you have to remember, our volunteers were on a closed course, working with a safety net. They weren't out here driving alone with the rest of us.
You can get 420 Radio on the go with the Ustream video app for Android and iPhone. Go to rad-r.us/420Ustream or just click the Ustream app icon for Android or iPhone below the live radio feed at 420radio.org.
You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs. We've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear.
Herbage Designs. We've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herbage and Herb.
My name's Tara Sulzin, and I've worked in environmental conservation for many years. I'm a big supporter of Measure 91 because our current marijuana laws have failed us. We have the opportunity this fall to vote to support legalizing, taxing, and regulating marijuana in Oregon. There are many obvious reasons for reforming marijuana here in Oregon. There are over 12,000 arrests and citations each year. That's one every 45 minutes. I think those are the wrong priorities for our public safety. And there are also many other unintended consequences that come with the current system. By treating adult marijuana use as a crime, we're forcing those who grow marijuana to exist in the black market. That means they go out into our natural areas, wilderness, and forests to grow marijuana. These illegal marijuana grows pose a serious environmental problem because they don't belong in our forests and natural areas. They remove vegetation, they harm our habitat, and they hurt wildlife. Regulated marijuana would be grown like normal crops, but illegal marijuana growers are tapping into our fragile creeks and streams and actually dry them up. It's not just outdoor marijuana growing that poses a threat to our environment. Illegal indoor growing does as well. Because they can't take advantage of energy conservation programs, indoor growing wastes a tremendous amount of power. There are a lot of reasons to support regulating marijuana with Measure 91. Protecting our environment is one of them.
The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, treat law enforcement with respect and stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney." Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at omarfigueroa.com.
You can't handle the truth.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
You have offended my family.
Hey, this is great, man.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
I know nothing.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
We don't need no stinking budget.
Homosexuality, immorality in general.
Down the centuries, you have slurred the meaning of the words "we, the people."
Be warned, this is not your mother's marijuana.
You could ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
I want to ask you a bunch of questions. I want to have them answered immediately.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant. Clatsop County District Attorney Josh Marquis of Astoria, Oregon, is none too happy about citizens like me poking around in his public records. Now, DA Marquis, the de facto spokesperson for law enforcement's opposition to Oregon's Measure 91, our marijuana legalization initiative, is trying to intimidate me into ceasing my investigation into the misuse of federal grant money and county resources to plan, produce, promote, and present so-called educational events that only occur when marijuana legalization is on the ballot. Yesterday, I learned that DA Marquis has filed a complaint with the Oregon Secretary's of State's office regarding my fundraising for this investigation. I have created an online fundraiser at gofundme.com/FightSabet to raise $5,000 for the fees that 5 counties will charge me for Oregon open records requests. I've made requests for these counties' district attorneys and drug prevention coordinators' emails concerning the planning of the Oregon Marijuana Education Summit and Tour featuring my nemesis Kevin Sabet. Knowing Sabet's anti-legalization marketing campaign like I do, I knew that this education would consist of scaremongering, half-truths, and obfuscations intended to produce doubt among Oregon voters who are predicted to pass Measure 91. DA Marquis' complaint is frivolous, but it is a significant reaction to the headway I've been making in this investigation. He claims that requesting these records is a pro-Measure 91 activity that should require me to form an official political action committee, or PAC, and disclose my fundraising as political activity. He further wishes me to disclose my funders, which is odd considering most of them are already publicly listed on the GoFundMe site. And the few anonymous donors I have, 10 out of the 34 who've donated, they're just citizens with no ties to any public funds or Measure 91 campaign resources whatsoever. Now, while I am stridently pro-marijuana legalization, I'm also firmly pro-free and fair elections and anti-district attorneys breaking the law. While the chief petitioner of Measure 91 is a personal friend of mine, I do not work for the Measure 91 campaign, and I am not funded by the Measure 91 campaign. And if someone can show me that public officials have been using public money to produce educational materials and events promoting Measure 91, I'll be happy to investigate that too. What I am is a private citizen raising private donations for seeking records that any citizen is entitled to review by law. That's not pro-Measure 91. That's pro-First Amendment. What does DA Josh Marquis have against government transparency anyway? And as intimidation tactics go, it seems kind of moot, since even if it is upheld, I would just register and disclose everything with the Secretary of State and then continue with the requests. DA Marquis' filing of this complaint comes a day after I have sent letters and documentation to the Oregon Secretary of State, the Oregon Attorney General, and U.S. Congressman Earl Blumenauer, my representative, detailing what I believe to be significant violations of ethics and the law by Marquis and other Oregon County officials involved with both the 2014 and 2012 versions of the Oregon Marijuana Education Summit. And Congressman Blumenauer seems to agree with me. I had emailed those as PDFs as well, and I CC'd the Clatsop County Community Relations Coordinator, Tom Bennett, who's been dealing with my requests. Do you think perhaps Bennett let DA Marquis know I was calling in state officials and a U.S. congressman for help? And maybe that fueled his complaint? Worse, DA Marquis' latest attempt at intimidating me comes on the heels of my latest request for emails from private Gmail accounts that I believe DA Marquis and DA LaRich in Jefferson County may have been using for official business in order to circumvent Oregon open records law. What could be so sensitive to DA Josh Marquis and DA Stephen LaRich in those Gmail accounts that has gotten me 2 rejection emails from the Clatsop County Community Relations Coordinator so far, and this specious complaint to the Secretary of State? If these Gmail accounts, which are, by the way, coastda@gmail.com and madressda@gmail.com, if they're being used for official public business, then they are subject to the Oregon Open Records Law. And it seems that DA Marquis is well aware of that. In an email I have dated August 30th, 4 days after I sent my first records request to both Clatsop and Jefferson counties, DA Marquis uses the coastda@gmail.com account to contact an unknown recipient, presumably the coordinator of the summit and tour. In the email, DA Marquis explains, quote, "Both Stephen LaRich and I have received very invasive and harassing demands for all our emails, phone calls, even websites visited," end quote, and follows that up with, quote, "Now Steve has a private email address, madressda@gmail.com. So why would DA LaRich now need a private email address after I had made records requests for his official county emails? And of course, Marquis continues, quote, "He, meaning well, asked me about inviting the loon who sent the demand, Russ Belville, to be a presenter. I told him I thought that was a very bad idea," end quote. Why is it that a citizen who seeks a public records request is considered by the district attorney of Clatsop County to be a loon? This is not DA Marquis' first attempt to intimidate me. I first filed my requests on August 26th to the county clerk, 5 days after I had learned Kevin Sabet would be coming to town to reprieve the summit that in 2012 was very clearly anti-Measure 80. That was our 2012 legalization measure. And it was very clearly funded by public money. The very next day, DA Marquis himself called me directly. Now, I don't know if this is standard procedure. These are the first records requests I've ever made. In fact, my first requests were Federal Freedom of Information Act requests because I didn't even know there was a state-level version for Oregon. I do now, and you can learn more at open-oregon.com. But I did find it a bit intimidating that the man I'm investigating for his possible breaches of ethics and the law was calling me about my investigation. I was even more intimidated as DA Marquis repeatedly prefaced his remarks with, well, as a lawyer, I have to say. And he explained to me how he would be the one making the decisions as to which of his emails I could review. I took those concerns to the county manager, Scott Summers, in an email dated September 2nd asking if Summers, rather than DA Marquis, could be in charge of determining which of DA Marquis' emails I would receive. This earned me an email reply from DA Marquis using his county email address, sent just 33 minutes after I had sent the email to Mr. Summers. Quote, I doubt you would be intimidated by anything I could say, and I frankly consider this request harassment, end quote, DA Marquis wrote to me. Now, why would an elected official consider an open records request harassment at the same time he is telling me, quote, I foolishly attempted to expedite your non-request. The FOIA does not apply to state agencies, end quote. Now, this began a series of back and forth emails between me and DA Marquis, which eventually led to him ordering me, through his county email address, to not contact him anymore. I did respond to both his county and his Gmail address, expressing my belief that I can't be ordered to not email a public official on a public email address, at least not without a court judging that it's harassment. He responded to me with the CoastDA@Gmail address, that the same address that I've made the latest requests over, and said, quote, if weed makes people as mean and crazy as you, I've seriously underestimated its dangers, end quote. Literally, that's what DA Marquis told me, that I'm mean and crazy. In our back and forth, I did accuse him of cannabis bigotry, of using public resources to lobby against Measure 91, and of violating the law. But I don't think I wrote anything mean and crazy. Sarcastic and snarky, perhaps. Now, since the local media has begun digging into the political nature of these educational events, the promoters have been scrambling to replace all the public funding they had counted on with private donations, including $10,000 from the Oregon Sheriff's Association that D.A. LaRich seems to have raised during work hours from his county office. But the advertising and coordination of the 2014 event may have already used public resources. Best Care Prevention, a federal grant recipient, and members of the Oregon Liquor Control Commission withdrew from the event once the Oregon Health Authority sent notice that it was clearly a political event against Measure 91. The materials for the 2014 event were produced by county employees in coordination with Kevin Sabet, based on their work at the 2012 event that was openly exhorting no votes on Measure 80 and made no attempt to hide its use of public resources. So what does Josh Marquis have to hide? If it's just an educational event and nobody's misused any public funds, he should welcome the disclosure of his emails. If there's nothing damning about his use of a Gmail account to conduct public business, why retaliate with an elections complaint against me? There's something fishy going on in Astoria, and it's not the delicious seafood. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll extend this rant. I will read you Josh Marquis' official complaint letter to the Secretary of State's office about me, with my reactions interspersed. You're listening to The Russ Belville Show on 420radio.org.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio is 24-hour marijuana legalization radio. At Royal Queen Seeds, we've got premium feminized cannabis seeds, including auto-flowering varieties for the medical cannabis user. We've got bulk shipments available and new CBD oil. Plus, we accept payment in Visa, MasterCard, and Bitcoin, as well as other methods. Check out our website at royalqueenseeds.com for more information. We are located in the Netherlands, and we have online grow experts ready to help you now at royalqueenseeds.com. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio.org. When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The Law Office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com.
Welcome back, 51 after the hour, and as promised, we'll continue this radical rant. This is the text of the complaint letter that Josh Marquis sent in to the Oregon Secretary of State's office yesterday regarding my requests for records. By this letter, I am requesting investigation and appropriate sanctions against Russ Belville, address unknown to me, but he represents to be in Portland, Oregon, and is a self-described activist and writer for the legalization of marijuana. To be very specific, Mr. Belville has raised and spent well over $2,000 from, according to one of his websites, GoFundMe.com/FightSabet. Actually, he wrote www.fundme/FightSabet.com. At least 30 different sources. The sole purpose of this fundraising is to finance his self-described investigation of myself and other elected officials who have dared to voice opposition to Measure 91. He continues, ORS 260.044 and related statutes require anyone who expends more than $750 in favor or in opposition to a ballot measure. The entirety of Mr. Belville's investigation is to silence opponents of the ballot measure. He is unrestrained in his belief without any accompanying evidence that I, an elected official as defined by ORS 260.433, have violated state and federal laws by speaking out against Measure 91. Okay, so already he's trying to obfuscate exactly what's going on here. What you have done, Marquis, is violated laws by using a Gmail address to conceal your work on these clearly political events from open records requests. And you've used your office and its resources in coordination with other county officials and offices to campaign against a ballot measure. You can speak out against it all you like. In fact, I just was at the Salem City Club debate where you spoke out against it with Representative Blumenauer in the debate. Did you see me trying to stop you from speaking out there? Not at all. I just expect you to have to play by the same rules I have to play by. And that is, if I want to play in the political pool, I got to raise my own private money to do so. You should have to do the same thing. You shouldn't get the benefit of taxpayer resources, taxpayer offices, taxpayer grant money to campaign against marijuana initiatives, or any initiatives for that matter. He continues, quote, I presume he will respond that he is simply a community-funded journalist seeking the truth, but even the most cursory review of Mr. Belville's various websites and articles he proudly announces are published on internet venues, including High Times and the Huffington Post, make it clear he is a strident activist who bitterly opposes anyone speaking out in opposition to marijuana legalization. No, not true at all, actually. I am a strident activist for marijuana legalization, but I have no issue whatsoever with people speaking out against it. In fact, I welcome it. It gives me more material for my daily talk show. However, I am adamantly opposed to my opponents having the benefit of their public offices, their public resources, and their public funding to produce anti-legalization events, especially because I have to beg and scrape for every private dollar of funding I receive to produce my pro-legalization media. Marquis continues, quote, based on the wording and hyperlinks in the website joshmarquisexposed.com, the author of that site has paid for special billing on Google's search page, and I believe Mr. Belville to be the author and creator of that otherwise anonymous website. If I were running for office, which I did in May of this year, Mr. Belville could argue it was an attempt to unmask the real Josh Marquis. I recognize as an elected official, I have to put up with the outright lies on this website without recourse. I never, for example, sought a pay raise from voters, nor did I allow Mark Bebout to be released from jail. Both these cases, as well as the other misrepresentations in the Josh Marquis Exposed site, are simply lies. Oh, you have to put up with such political hardball. Oh, you poor man. First of all, I know the people who put together joshmarquisexposed.com, and I've given them permission to reprint my work, but I have not created or funded the website in any way. Furthermore, that thing on Mark Bebout being released from jail, stay tuned for hour 2. We'll tell you all about that one and how Bill O'Reilly is pissed off at Josh Marquis. Marquis' letter continues, but Mr. Belville is not attacking me because he thinks I'm doing a poor job as DA. His sole purpose is to affect the campaign for Measure 91, a motivation clearly expressed in the website in which he seeks and receives money to pursue public records requests for thousands of my emails, his articles in his publication, theweedblog.com, and now his efforts to smear my name and dissuade me from any further advocacy against Measure 91. Nice try. My clear motivation from the beginning is to see to it that the anti-legalization forum can't be produced with taxpayer resources like it clearly was in 2012. He continues, he is obviously free to criticize and even lie about my record in his own blog, on his own internet radio show, or by giving away articles to places like the Huntington Post, known in journalism as content farms, since they'll accept almost anything and pay nothing to fill bandwidth. Well, folks, this is what's called an ad hominem attack, bolstered by an appeal to authority fallacy. He continues, but when he raises and expends thousands of dollars to affect the outcome of an imminent ballot measure, he, like the other 3 organizations aside from the yes and no campaigns on Measure 91, is required to register with the Secretary of State and report the name, amount, and occupation of his contributors. To allow without independent expenditure reporting is to permit a shadow campaign funded by anonymous donors who can influence voters without ever revealing their identity, something fundamentally illegal under Oregon law. Exactly! Just what you guys have been doing with the so-called marijuana educational tour. Independent expenditures, not independent, public expenditures, trying to run a shadow campaign to influence the Oregon Measure 91 election. He concludes with, I would specifically refer your office to the fundme.com/FightSabet website, the joshmarquisexposed.com website, and only for purposes of Mr. Belville's stated reasons for his attacks on me, namely supporting Measure 91 and attacking those opposed to Measure 91, his primary website, theweedblog.com. Actually, my primary website is radicalruss.com. The Weed Blog is run by some other fellows who I do submit articles to. What I have a screenshot of the Google search page engine. If someone Googles my name, Josh Marquis, what I show is an ad that advertises the website Josh Marquis Exposed. This is only relevant to this complaint in that it requires expenditure of funds, and in combination with the almost $3,000 Mr. Belville brags about raising, I believe he is also expending money as part of his campaign to silence opposition to Measure 91. Again, not silencing anybody, just asking them to play by the same rules I have to play by. What Marquis calls silencing, I call expecting public officials, especially district attorneys, to obey the law. Oh, we got plenty more of this rant left. Josh Marquis, you wanted my attention? You wanted my sincere and undivided attention? Join me in hour 2 when we take a look at the Clatsop County jail roster of May 2012, when a man was released from that jail who later went on to murder 2 people in Portland because the jail was overcrowded. Guess who was taking up some spots in that jail? You'll find out in hour 2. For everyone here at 420radio.org, I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant